Let's talk about some of the issues. Part of those is the size of writers' rooms. And when we say the WGA...
The mini rooms and minimum staffing,
Well, and part of that is, it is the WGA. It is the Writers Guild. This is a guild in the same way that you would have a unionized group of electricians or plumbers. It's a different kind of work, but it is still organized labor. It is still people banding together to try and collectively bargain out deals. It's just these are writers, so they use their pens and their keyboards as opposed to being a plumber or electrician. So the size of writers' rooms, all of these things are very highly negotiated, bargained for, fought over, and with the proliferation of streaming, now you're seeing smaller episode counts because writers are paid by numbers of episodes. So you're seeing smaller episode counts, smaller writers' rooms, and even some limited series that are being written by one person.
Allegedly.
Well, like for example, think James Gunn writing Peacemaker. 8 episodes, he's listed as the writer on all 8 episodes in that series. So there's not as many young writers coming up through the guild like anything else. If you're a young plumber, you got to learn how to be a plumber coming up. You don't start as a master craftsman.
Oh, yeah.
You come up and, you're 23, 24 years old. You have to have a training ground for being a writer to eventually become a head writer and take over, be a showrunner. So the fact that these rooms are getting smaller and smaller, and the numbers of writers.
YouTube model, where you get your training however the hell you get your training, and we'll all just pick the best of a whole bunch of mediocrity. There are many effects here, and I think the mini rooms and the minimum staffing levels are probably the most straightforward negotiable ones. It's just the employer, represented by the AMPTP, cowards, cutthroats, and weasels. They are just refusing to negotiate it on it at all, But where it affects you and I is it's like, there's no development. The industry, the producers said, not our problem. We'll figure out how to get quality work later, which should bother you and I as, let's say, fans, appreciators of the art form, because that means there's just a lot more catch can. Maybe the person's good, maybe they aren't. And I'm not saying that formal training is everything, but apprenticeship works, especially in something that is incredibly hard as writing down a television or a film story.
Some of the writers have been pointing out that as they were coming up and were young writers on sitcoms, TV shows, even something as simple as Nickelodeon, you have these writers' rooms and you learn how to write, but you also go to the set.
Basics of your craft.
Yeah, you go to the set, you meet the people there, you try and figure out what their voices are and have that go into your writing of the program. But when you have shorter writing windows, fewer people in the room, and there isn't funding there to send the writers to the set, then all of a sudden the quality of the writing across the board goes down.
And writing, the work is affected. Like 4 or 5 little writing rooms. Only one of those writing rooms might be successful enough to write a show that gets picked up where they actually make real money. Everyone else, they got paid development fees for all intents and purposes. They may make next to nothing, and that is the studios, the producers, saying, you know what, we're going to put our risk. 80% of these people are going to share our risk. Even the ones who win have to work themselves to death, but still are only paid per episode. It's one of those things where the producers are using an old model of payment for a new model of production. And with the WGA's demands in this area, minimum staffing levels, changing the way mini rooms and development work is paid, it's really just trying to say, hey, we could make a living before when production was like that, and so we're paid like that. We need the pay to match the new mode of production so that we can still actually make a living, that we can still make enough. We didn't make a successful show. We're not, oh, okay, I got to go back to waiting tables or I'm just out of the industry overnight.
But it's also getting paid for re-airing reruns. And when you have streaming...
The residuals area,
there aren't the residuals there because it's all just streaming. He doesn't have an air date.
The residuals are there. The money is there. What it is that the producers don't want to pay. They don't want to give up, because what does the WGA want? They want us, here, let's, like every other aspect of what we do, we have third party, the Nielsen ratings in television, which was considered that trusted third party that could give us, hey, this is what the thing's actually doing. Or in film, we had those box office figures that, again, a number of people depended on. You could audit the information, and the WGA had access, and so did a lot of other people. The streamers is like, yeah, we're not letting you in that. You just have to accept what we pay you, and successful or not, who knows?
When Netflix comes out and says the number one show or movie that we had on Netflix this week is, you get some really convoluted numbers coming out as to what is number one, what's number two, what's number three, and why is it number one, number two, number three. And I get it. It's still a new.
Number one getting 90% of the views, and then 2 through 10 splitting up the rest. Like, what does that graph look like? Is it like this, or is it more like that? Is it?
In some ways, I get it, because we're in a different world now. We're in a streaming world where a lot of times if someone pushes play, it's not like when you sit down and watch TV and you just sort of watch the whole program. People start and stop and watch half of it, then they come back 3 days later.
Yeah, but who cares? The streamers have that data. They don't want to share it, because then they'd actually have to pay.
But that's the point, though.
That's what it all comes down to, is the producers don't want to pay. They're like, no, we're happy with the way it is.
And
anytime the new thing lets us pay you less, we're going to stick with that. And this is another area, and this is what's, I think, frustrating, and what everyone should know is that there's some of these areas where they flat refuse to negotiate on. They won't negotiate. There's they have no response on residuals other than no. They have no response on the writers' rooms. It's rich people porn.
Oh,
White Lotus.
That's the one way of describing
that's a single writer. Well, if you dig a little deeper on how writing credits are given out on television shows and how some of the stuff works, maybe that writer did all that, but there's plenty of even old model writers where they're like, they always had 4 assistants. Did you really? Because 8 hours of television, just you, just out of your head, no rewrites, no, hey, can you take another pass? Or, hey, can you bundle this together and then I'll give my imprimatur? I find it a little hard to believe. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I do find it hard to believe. James Gunn, he's got nothing else going on in his life. He can just, nope, I'm in the room now. Don't interrupt me with any of the other crap I'm doing. Edit room, promotions. Oh, I'm taking over the DCEU. But yes, I did all of that on my own. Not buying that.
And even
incredibly difficult to believe.
And it is interesting too that the WGA has been pushing back on their own members that are doing that. The James Gunns of the world, Mike White, who did the White Lotus, they've been getting pushed back on by their own guild and saying, look, we need this. This is a potential problem spot for the other members of the Writers Guild, and you may look at it as creative control. But this has much bigger impacts than just saying, well, I wrote the entire
never had
series.
Creative control anyway. They always did. They're the boss. It's like, I don't like that. I like that.